Today is January 24th, 2025. I am Gabriele Fellows with the Museums of Lake County, and this is an oral history interview with Linda Lake. Linda, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to get started, what can you tell us about your name? Were you named after anyone?
No, I was not. I changed my name several times over the years, and I've been Linda Lake for long time. I guess about 40 years now.
And what is your date of birth and how old are you?
11/22/1948, so I am 76.
And where were you born and raised?
In Beverly, Massachusetts.
What were your parents' first and last names?
My mother's name was Gertrude Caudle, and her heritage was Irish, mostly Irish, and some Scotch and English. And my dad's name was Mieczysław Szczesny. They were immigrants from Poland.
And do you have any siblings?
I do. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother.
Describe the neighborhood or community you grew up in.
Well, I grew up in a town which had a very, very long history because it was once part of Salem, Massachusetts. And it's right on the Atlantic Ocean. And so we could actually walk to the beach. So, I grew up swimming in the salt water my whole life and still, really enjoy that. It was a new neighborhood. My parents built their house themselves, the 2 of them, on a street that had just been, few houses on it, and new families were moving in. So it was a very typical 1950s childhood where us kids all played out on the street or walked to the beach or played in the woods. We had ice skating ponds and sledding hills right nearby, and we had pretty much everything we wanted when we were kids. We had the ice cream parlor to walk to, the drugstore to walk to, and we could actually even walk downtown to the middle of the town. It wasn't all that far either, so it was a wonderful place.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a mechanic.
And what company did he work for?
He worked for the United Shoe Machinery Corporation, which is a very large corporation and historic. It was started in the 1880s, and the factory was in our town. It was right down the street, and he and I both worked there. I worked there after I graduated from high school, and he spent his career taking care of the cars and trucks that they owned, that the factory owned. And the factory is famous. You can look it up online. It was built in the late 1800s, and there were 3 buildings, and they were each 1/4 of a mile long. And they built tenements across the railroad tracks for the workers in the early days to live in. So it had a long history. It was a great place to work.
Did your mom work outside the home?
She did, yes. She was a glass blower.
Oh, talk about that.
She started out working also in a factory where they made tubes for radios and television sets at the time. And so she blew the inside part of the glass that went into the tube, the big tube. It was very intricate glass blowing work, but she ended up doing that as her career.
And what are some of your earliest childhood memories?
I I think the fact that we grew up on a street where all the children were our same age. There were 3 Lindas on my street.
Oh,
And everybody got along. Everybody played together. We had wonderful barbecues and parties, and we would go out and play cops and robbers and Relivo and kick the can and all kinds of games until the streetlights came on. Very typical 50s childhood. Ice skating was always a big part of our winter sports. We had a pond at the end of the street. We had woods for sledding that led into the golf course, so there were lots of hills. We once had a toboggan that fit 7 people, and we had a ball on that thing for many years.
Whoa.
Crashed it a few times into trees and things like that. But it was a wonderful childhood.
What was your
very, very good.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I would say English.
What did you like about English?
Well, I love to read, and I got that, I think, from my mother. My mother was an only child, so she read a lot. The one thing she did have, even though she grew up very poor, was books. And she instilled that in us, and from an early age, I read books and still do to this day.
What was your favorite book growing up?
Oh, probably the Nancy Drew books, for sure. Read every one.
And who was your favorite teacher?
In the 6th grade, I had a teacher by the name of Miss Colley. And she was a single woman, and she was the kindest, most wonderful person that I can remember from my childhood. And at the time, it was a bit traumatic for me because I had a new baby sister. And she allowed me to talk about the experience of having this new baby in the house, which helped me a lot to adjust to that. And she also cared so much about her students. And in the late afternoon, when we were all ready to get on the bus for the trek home, because we had been bused to a far away school that year because there were too many students to fit into our neighborhood school. So that year we were bused across town. It was a long day. She would let us put our heads down on the desk and she would read out loud to us. And I'll never forget how wonderful that felt when she would do that.
So did you go to college?
I did not. I went straight to work at the factory from high school. But then I later went to a business college because, computers were coming into existence. And I knew that I could get ahead if I learned some skills in that area. So I took some business courses at night at a business school and learned how to use key punch machine with all those cards with the little holes in them and other new machinery that was coming into play. And then I did get a promotion at my work where I did start doing key punch. And then I also learned key tape machines when they came out. which was typing directly onto magnetic tape. And then the magnetic tapes were transferred to the big, giant, reel-to-reel computers. So that was all very innovative at the time. And it was fun to learn about computers at the very early stages of the game.
How long did you work there?
I worked there 6 years.
And what other jobs have you had in your life?
I later worked in banking, and I did key punching there, and that was nighttime work. We processed all the checks that people wrote. And then when I moved to California, I had I grew herbs and sold them, and had a lot of gardening type of work that I did myself. And then I became the legal secretary for my soon-to-be husband, who was an attorney at the time. So then he and I worked together for 15 years. And then I worked at a winery for a little while until I finally started working here at the Lower Lake Museum.
So talk about how you started out as a part-time temporary employee here at the schoolhouse, and then you worked your way up to curator. Talk about that.
Okay, so it was 1997, and I had been working as a legal secretary for 15 years, but I was on workers' comp because I was starting to get carpal tunnel syndrome, and I didn't want to continue typing and aggravate that, and I was sort of looking for something new to do, and I was off work, and I would come over here to the museum to meet with Jane because we were involved with theater, and we wanted to be able to have plays up here on the upper floor of the theater. So I was part of this group that wanted to use the auditorium. And Jane and John Weaver also got involved in the theater group. And I would come over and visit her and talk about some of the theater stuff that was going on. And one day she just said to me, Linda, come here, I have to talk to you. And if you knew Jane, you kind of got a little scared because she could be pretty aggressive and to the point. And you kind of wondered what she needed to talk to you about when she said things like that. So we went into the parlor and she said, Linda, how would you like to come work with me here at the museum? She said, it's just part-time and it's $7.50 an hour. And I'm like, I didn't know what to say to that. It definitely wasn't anything I ever thought of doing, number one. And number two, it definitely wasn't a full-time job. And number three, it was really low pay. Am I going to stop looking for a new career and take on something like this? I didn't know. I thought about it and talked to Jane some more and finally decided it would be fun. So I started out working just 2 days a week, like 15 hours a week. And then it just grew from there. And when Jane turned 80, that was when she decided that she needed to turn over the reins of the museum to me. And I had been working here for 5 years, 4 years, I think, maybe. Part-time, I was finally working 18 hours a week. And at some point, the county just asked me if I wanted to become the curator and work. Well, it wasn't full-time. I always worked 30 hours a week. And also take care of the Lakeport Museum. And that also was a very big decision for me, to take on both museums. I hadn't spent a lot of time in the Lakeport Museum, but I loved that museum too, and the collection was beautiful, and I knew I could make a difference there, so I took the job.
What was it like being curator?
It was wonderful. It was the best job I've ever had. I had terrific support from the Public Services Department and the people that worked there, and my boss, Kim Kleinmeyer, and they supported me 100% in whatever I was doing, and kept my budget up to the point where we still had the lowest budget in the county, but it was enough to support my workers and the things I needed the most. And it was a great experience, meeting people from all over the world, delving into history. I loved it. I loved every part of it.
Do you remember some of the exhibits that were here during your time?
Yeah, we had some that were really fun. The pioneer clothing was always fun. The old style cameras, the household items were great. The case where we had the items from the Jago store, which is a general store over in Jago Bay, that was very well known by everybody in the South County area. Mrs. Jago was a strong figure. They lived here for many, many years, and in the early days, 20s, 30s, 40s, and everybody knew her store. And we had inherited a whole bunch of wonderful items from that store, like old bottles of ink and pens and this liquid that could preserve eggs, and just some razors and old razor blades and all kinds of gadgets for the home, can openers, and that was one that people really liked. We also had a replica of the Cache Creek Dam, which drew a lot of interest. There was a lot of items, and they were mostly all donated by local families. And that was the key. People cleaned out their barns and their medicine cabinets, and some people had items that went back to 1900, and they brought them in. And it was fascinating when people would come with their items to donate. I loved that part of it.
What were some of the challenges of being curator?
Keeping track of everything. We eventually were able to move from recording all the donations and the information by hand to doing it on the computer. And so that was a huge change and a huge learning curve to do that.
So talk about the radio show you had while you were curator.
KPFZ, community radio. That was a very fun thing to do. It was called News from the Past. And I would do an hour-long show. I had another person on the show with me, and she was sort of the moderator, and then I would come in with my historic story for the day and tell that or read that, and we would also take calls, and we would have a history quiz, which I would make up a question and find the answer to it, and then ask the audience. And that was one of the highlights of the show. People loved to call in and see if they could guess the answer to the quiz. So the radio show was great. I think it ran for, I don't know, maybe about 7 years or so.
And what were John and Jane Weaver like?
The most productive and industrious people you would ever want to meet. They had the most creative and innovative ideas, and they knew how to carry them out. They were brilliant. They were artists. John could build anything, including rocks, which he built for one of our events here when we did a Western. And he, as part of the set, he had to have these big rocks for the outlaws to hide behind. And so he made them out of paper mache.
Whoa.
They were so incredibly creative, and Jane was very authoritarian. She was the head of the museum, and nobody told her no. And if somebody did, she did the opposite. If she wanted it done, she got it done. You didn't say no to Jane. And because of her tenacity, we have this building today, and we have this auditorium today. She and John literally did the work to create this beautiful restored building. They lobbied for the money, they raised the money, they worked with the county, they begged the county, they defied the county. They did everything that was necessary to get this building restored and open. And the community, I don't think will ever forget them.
What's your favorite memory of Jane?
She was a great teacher, and she taught me so many things. She was the best mentor I've ever had in my life. And one day, she even taught me how to lace up my shoe because she told me I was doing it wrong. And I've never forgotten that. It was the silliest, tiniest thing, but she showed me how to do it much easier than I was doing it. She was like that. She knew how to do everything the easy way.
And besides theater groups, what kinds of groups rented the auditorium?
Lots of performances. Patrick Ball, Irish singer, lots of small singing groups. And the one thing we didn't do was dancing. Jane didn't want they didn't want to stress the building out by having dancing on the upper floor. So that was banned. But there were a lot of dinners, graduation. My daughter actually graduated high school from the auditorium because she went to Richard Lewis School, which was an alternative school, and they had their graduation here. There were weddings, there were funerals, pretty much anything you could think of, except dances.
And when you were curator, who were your coworkers?
Dwayne Goforth was my assistant curator. He came on a few years after I started, when the county allotted funds for me to have an assistant curator. And I worked 3 days at the Lakeport Museum, and he worked here at the Lower Lake Museum. And that worked out really well. I could eventually spend more time up there to get things in ship shape up there at that museum. And it was great that the county allotted more money at the time for that position. Otherwise, it was only part-time temporary people. And I think the gal that worked here at Lower Lake, Kamisha, she was here for quite a few years. And there were some other gals. It's hard to remember all their names, that worked in Lakeport. Most of them aren't even here in the county anymore. Pretty much scattered, moved away.
So talk about when a Native American basket was stolen from the Lakeport Museum.
Oh, okay. That was an interesting thing. We had security cameras there. And the Pomo basket room seemed very secure. All the cases were locked. It didn't seem like it was possible for somebody to get into the cases without us knowing it. But as it happened, of course, they figured out how to do it. And it took us several days before we even noticed that it was gone. Because of the way they did it, they pried open the glass top of the case. There was a tiny little space where they must have been able to put a screwdriver or some sort of a tool in between the wood and the glass and pry the glass up. And they got the whole thing up, which was a large, large piece of glass, and were able to slide it aside so that they could just reach in and take the basket. It would have taken some time, so we still can't even figure that out. We looked at the security footage. Donna Howard, who had been the previous curator of the museums, had been working on a Sunday, and that was the most likely day that we thought it might have happened. Because Sunday wasn't a busy day at the museum. They were only open, I think, like 1 to 5 or 12 to 5 up there in Lakeport. And if someone was distracting Donna or she was eating her lunch or something, she was there alone. So we narrowed it down. We really thought it had happened on that Sunday. And she remembered one person who spent a particularly long time in the basket room. But as we looked at the footage, it turned out that we couldn't see that person doing anything. So we never did figure it out. We had no video of anybody doing the break-in. And so, no, we never caught the person or retrieved the basket.
Was anything else ever stolen?
There was one thing stolen here at the Lower Lake Museum. It was a sword, and it was up high on the wall, attached with several hooks and securely fastened to the wall. So we thought, during some event, what we think happened was you couldn't reach it. No person was tall enough to be able to reach it. What we think happened was a father perhaps put his son on his shoulders to reach up to it, and also had to pry the holders out of the wall to get it out, which they did. They probably could have done that in a matter of minutes if nobody was in the room. But then they had to get it outside. So never found that, never figured it out. That's only a guess that that's how it happened.
What's your favorite aspect of Lake County history?
Well, the pioneer history is exciting to me because it was like it was kind of like a Western movie. The towns really were rural, and there were outlaws, and there were stagecoach robberies, and those are the things that I find the most fascinating. Buck English is one of my favorite people. He was an outlaw in the Middletown area. Robbed the stagecoach that as it came over Mount St. Helena once. He was shot up with buckshot once by the sheriff who was chasing him, and he survived. He eventually was sent to San Quentin, and he got out and was mentored by a wonderful man who helped prisoners after they got out of jail. But he died shortly thereafter at a fairly young age, and he's buried in the pauper's grave in Colma in San Francisco. I went to find his grave, and it's just a pauper's field where he was buried. So you can see I know a lot about him. He was one of my favorite personalities from the early days of Lake County. I think there's a few people like that I find interesting, and that we actually have a lot of information on them. That's exciting, you know. We also have a diary written by Lucas Wiley, who was the Justice of the Peace in Lower Lake, and he's buried in the Lower Lake Cemetery. He's also one of my favorite characters, and we have a lot of information on him and his actual writing of his diary. So if people are interested in any of the information on those two people who lived here, Lucas Wiley lived here around 1868. You can find it here at the museum.
So when did you retire from being curator?
I retired from the county in 2015.
And when did you join the preservation committee, and how long have you served?
Oh, since 1997 or 1998, and I'm still on the committee.
And what are some of the projects the board has accomplished over the years?
Well, we did raise money to build the elevator. We also raised money in a fundraiser to build the added restrooms upstairs, and that fundraiser was called Lavatory Loot.
Oh, okay.
I remember the name. And those were two of the major projects. Let's see what else we did. We've painted the fencing, which it needs painting again very badly. And we completed the fencing around the entire outside of the building. Those are some of the big ones, I guess. Besides putting on lots of events for the public, which everybody enjoyed, we did an event every year called Somewhere in Time. And we took a particular time period and we dressed accordingly. We had a play or music. We once did old time radio as the program and had lots of various acts. We did a Western play. We did a speakeasy. We served dinner and had lots and lots of fun. I think the events were one of the biggest things that people enjoyed about the Preservation Committee. Everybody always asked, what's our next event? Still to this day, I get women asking if we're going to have another fashion show. We had a fashion show every year, and it sold out every year.
What were the fashion shows like?
Typical. We served a wonderful luncheon. We had a musical guest. We had a piano player. I was generally the MC. We had 6 to 8 models who would model clothing from the local clothing stores, which we did have several at the time. And the ladies would all dress up, and we would have a hat contest, so everybody wore a hat. And we had male waiters for the fashion show, and the male waiters had to judge who had the prettiest hat or the most unique hat. So we enlisted the males to be the judges. So the women would flirt with them so that they could get their vote. But it was a lot of fun.
So talk a little bit about the museum you are curating at the Wild Diamond Winery.
Okay, it's a new venture. The Wild Diamond Winery has had a tasting room out on Spruce Grove Road for, I think, only about 3 years now. The owner has owned the property for about 9 years, and the vineyard was planted even before that. And some prior owner had planted some of the vineyard. They have much more planted now. And the owner lives in Florida, but he's very, very interested in the Pomo history and the history of Lake County in general. And so it was a historic ranch, the property. There was a little red farmhouse on the property and a storage silo, and they raised hogs and chickens, I'm told. And obviously they raised vegetables too, and they had a walnut orchard there. And this goes back, I only have that history going back to maybe the 50s. And there was a little building that was built there originally alongside the farmhouse that was built in 1955. And the owner has completely remodeled the inside of it. The outside is how it looked originally with aluminum metal siding, and it looks like a shack. Inside, it's all been remodeled, and it's all beautiful and heated inside. And he has a collection of pomo baskets. So he wanted to share those with visitors that came to the winery. And when I first met him and he learned that I was the curator here for the county, he thought that that would be a perfect fit, and so did I, that we could turn that little building with the pomo baskets into a cultural center or a visitor center. We haven't quite figured out the name of it yet, but we now have some videos about basket making and the history of the pomos in Lake County, and we have a collection of diamonds, mostly from my property, because I happen to live right next door to the winery. And that whole hill that the winery is on does not have a name, but it's right above Hidden Valley, and it also has diamonds. It has the red volcanic soil where the diamonds are. So we have a diamond display, and he has a collection of Edward Curtis photos from Lake County that we've put on the walls, and it's growing, put it that way. We're adding items and found items that he's finding on the property from prior people who have lived there, and those things are fun and interesting. There's some sad irons, and there's some tractor wheels from a John Deere tractor from 1927. So we're collecting, and hopefully people will enjoy just a smidgen of history as they come to taste wine.
When is it open?
Whenever I want to be there. We don't have hours, but at this point, I'm trying to be there on the first and third Saturdays of the month. It doesn't always work out. I can also give people a private tour because I'm right next door. So if anybody wants to come see the little museum, it's best to contact the winery or contact me before you come out in order to find out if we're open. Totally right now, I'm in charge of everything, and I'm also in charge of the hours, so it's kind of up to me. So that's how it's going. We'll see. It may grow into something more permanent in the future, but I'm happy with it the way it is right now.
So you were on the board of directors of the Senior Law Project. What is the Senior Law Project?
It was a nonprofit organization that would, for a very low fee, could help senior citizens with legal problems that might arise for them. All different kinds, disputes with companies, Social Security issues, Medicare issues. It could do the one lawyer who handled all the cases was paid by the nonprofit, but it was free or very low cost to seniors.
And how long did you do that for?
Oh gosh, I can't remember. Quite a few years. Maybe 7 or 8.
And talk about the Lake County Mediation Group and how you did mediation in the court system.
Yeah, that was another thing that began after I quit working as a legal secretary. I was looking for a new career, and I was able to go to Humboldt State for courses in mediation. At the time, mediation was a big deal in Humboldt County because of the clear cutting of the redwood trees. and a large group of people who wanted to save the trees, and of course the lumber companies who wanted to cut them. And so mediation became the vehicle by which they were able to learn to compromise and live together in Humboldt County amicably, because it was pretty violent for a while up there between the companies, the lumber companies, and the environmentalists. So Humboldt State devised this mediation program, and I took the courses. And then when I came back to Lake County, we started a mediation program here, and we eventually started teaching it, and I was one of the teachers. And we did mediation. Those of us who were certified, we did mediation in the small claims court. And it was an interesting occupation for a while. I did a few private mediations, but I didn't really make it it didn't really develop into anything I wanted to do as a permanent job. But it's very interesting, and it was wonderful to learn how to do it and how helpful it can be to mediate disputes rather than to where both people get a little bit of what they want rather than one person winning and one person losing. So, yeah, that was an interesting time too.
Have you ever been married, and do you have children?
Yes, and yes. I have 2 children. I was married to Ron Green for 43 years.
Oh, wow. And what are your children's names?
Dustin and Tara. Dustin lives in Indianapolis. He owns a roofing company. And my daughter Tara lives in Orange County, and she is an assistant U.S. attorney.
So what are some of your greatest accomplishments?
Oh, my. I don't know, having the careers that I had and being successful in all of them, I think, is an accomplishment. And also raising 2 children who are doing fantastic in their lives and in all aspects of their life. I'm pretty proud of that.
Have you ever traveled outside the U.S.?
Yeah, sure.
Where'd you go?
I went to Scotland and London when I was just 18. That was an adventure. Later on, I went to Panama, Italy, Greece, Mexico many times, Canada, Hawaii many times.
Did you visit the museums there?
I remember visiting little museums in Nova Scotia, which was one very really fun time early in my life, where I started to really get interested in museums. It was a very small museum, and it was Indian, Native American artifacts from Nova Scotia. But yes, of course, anywhere I traveled, I visited museums, for sure.
How would you describe your personality?
Outgoing. Definitely, I'm sort of a party person, as somebody recently described to me. I never thought of myself as that too much, but my family always did like to party, so I think I am that. And I love to talk to strangers, and I love seeking information and knowledge. So that's, over the years, that's become who I am, I think.
And what kinds of hobbies do you have right now? How do you spend your time?
I've done every type of artwork that there is. I'm currently really into collage and reading. I never stop reading. I can't be without a book.
What books are you reading?
Oh, right now I'm reading Erik Larson's The Demon Beast or something. It's actually history about the very beginnings of the Civil War, and when Lincoln is just getting elected. It's fascinating history. Yeah, it's a good historic book. Erik Larson writes pure history with a flair. If you've never read him, try him. He's good author.
And what would you describe as the best day of your life?
Oh dear, several. One of the best days I ever had was a day I spent alone in Rome. It was quite exciting. And being there by myself, being able to do whatever I wanted. I did a lot of interesting things that day, which I won't go into because it's too convoluted, I guess. But that, and then I think playing backgammon with Rosemary Leary was quite an experience. Rosemary Leary was Timothy Leary's wife, and she was still incognito at the time. She was still wanted, and her name was Sarah. And we were on Cape Cod, and she was living with a friend that we had gone to visit there on Cape Cod, and she had not been exonerated yet. What a lovely person. It was fascinating. And she later moved back to San Francisco, and our friend eventually did get her exonerated, and she was eventually, before she died, she was able to live her life again as Rosemary.
And what's something in your life you didn't do and you regret it now?
I don't have any regrets. Not yet, anyway.
And what's the best advice you could give future generations?
Get an education and go out and try new things all the time.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think I'm done.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and for sharing your stories.
Thank you for doing this. It's wonderful. Thanks. This was an article from October 8th, 2003. And it tells about the 10th anniversary celebration of the renovation and reopening of the Schoolhouse Museum. This clipping is from February 17th, 2005, and it's about myself being promoted to the curator of the Schoolhouse Museum and the Courthouse Museum in Lakeport. This clipping is from January 23rd, 2009, and it's just Dwayne Goforth, Kamisha, Linda Lake, Jane Weaver, and Mary Beth Alternator. We're preparing for Living History Day.
What was Living History Day?
Living History Day was, we actually did demonstrations, like people had to wash clothes on a washboard. They had to use the butter churn. We had some other devices, pioneered devices and activities for people to do, and we dressed up in the clothing of the day.